So there are certain circumstances when you have very crowded congregate settings, even on an outdoor basis. And remember, the CDC has said that there are circumstances, somewhat unusual, but are circumstances, even in an outdoor situation, when you have clustering of people together, that it might be better to be wearing masks.
6 weeks ago, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' re-election campaign committee started selling shirts and more that say, "Don't Fauci my Florida," and attacking what he called Faucism.
People who ultimately get infected, that they are generally without symptoms or minimally symptomatic. However, it is clear that they are capable of transmitting the infection to uninfected individuals. And the data that they reported indicates that if you look at the level of virus in the nasopharynx of a person who's vaccinated and has a breakthrough infection, and compare that to the level of virus in the nasopharynx of an unvaccinated person who's infected, they're essentially equivalent. Vaccinated person, even if there's a breakthrough infection, would transmit it to someone else. So the accumulation of all of those scientific facts, information, and evidence brought the CDC to make that decision to say, now, when you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask, not only outdoors, but you don't need to wear it indoors.
So on that third point, let me ask you this. If I have no symptoms and I have been vaccinated, but I'm infected, what's the difference between that and if I have no symptoms and am infected but have not been vaccinated?
Good question, John. And what the issue is that the level of virus in your nasopharynx, which is correlated with whether or not you were going to transmit it to someone else, is considerably lower. So even though there are breakthrough infections with vaccinated people, almost always the people are asymptomatic, and the level of virus is so low it makes it extremely unlikely, not impossible, but very, very low likelihood that they're going to transmit it. Whereas when people who are getting infected, who are without symptoms, who are not vaccinated, generally the titer or the level of virus, relatively speaking, is higher than in the vaccinated individuals. We've got to make that transition. If you are vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask outside. It would be a very unusual situation if you were going into a completely crowded situation where people are essentially falling all over each other. Then you wear a mask. But any other time, if you're vaccinated and you're outside, put aside the mask. You don't have to wear it. If you have a physical covering with one layer, you put another layer on, it just makes common sense that it likely would be more effective. And that's the reason why you see people either double masking or doing a version of an N95.
And I mentioned on the show last week that we need to get the private sector involved. And just a couple of days ago, we had the CEOs there who are going to be now putting it on full overdrive. So I would expect that very soon. When I say soon, I'm talking about days to a week, where you're going to start to see it go up like this. Not everybody tomorrow is going to be able to get a test, but pretty soon you're going to see a major escalation of capability and implementation. The areas of the country that are not hotspots, that are not going through the terrible ordeal that New York and California and Washington State are going through, they still have a window of significant degree of being able to contain. In other words, when you test, you find somebody, you isolate them, you get them out of circulation, and you do the contact tracing. When you have a big outbreak, it's tough to do anything but mitigation. We have an opportunity now that we have the availability of testing to do that. So you're going to be hearing more about how we can inform where we're going, particularly because we have the ability to test. What we're starting to see now in the Southern Hemisphere, in Southern Africa, and in the Southern Hemisphere countries, is that we're having cases that are appearing as they go into their winter season. And if, in fact, they have a substantial outbreak, it will be inevitable that we need to be prepared that we'll get a cycle around the second time. What does that mean for us and what we're doing? It totally emphasizes the need to do what we're doing in developing a vaccine, testing it quickly, and trying to get it ready so that we'll have a vaccine available for that next cycle. In addition
to do the randomized controlled trials of drug.
Now, what this chart shows is deaths in vaccinated people now outnumber those among the unvaccinated. But an expert tells me it leaves out a very important detail: how old those people are. Look closer at this chart you may have seen online. At some point after February, weekly deaths in vaccinated people surpassed those who didn't get a vaccine. That's the black line moving over the blue one. But UNC Dr. David Weber says what it's missing is age.
Most of the cases we're seeing now of deaths, or many of them, are in older people, much like we saw 2 years ago. The majority of older people, in particular because of their risks for COVID, are vaccinated. So it's not surprising if the majority of people are vaccinated, even if the vaccines are working, the majority of deaths will be in people who are vaccinated.
That's why the chart from the State Department of Health and Human Services includes a key phrase: age adjusted.
The real question is not what percentage of deaths or hospitalization are in vaccinated or in unvaccinated. It's by age, what's the risk of death in vaccinated versus unvaccinated individuals.